Already in the 270s, this crucial region was crisscrossed by extreme religious groups of Christian origin. These groups were distinguished by an apostolic mobility, which combined the missionary universalism of St. Paul with the ideal of wandering poverty associated with the disciples of Jesus in the Gospels. These holy wanderers expected to be supported entirely by the alms of those to whom they ministered. And they were a sight to be seen. The author of a letter written to direct the behavior of such groups warned them that when they passed through pagan villages, they should not burst out into singing the psalms, which they usually did to hearten the local Christians, lest they be mistaken for a troupe of traveling musicians. Such spirit-filled wanderers were local products. They would have a long history in subsequent centuries in the Syriac-speaking piety of the Christian Middle East. Yet others came from yet further to the east, from central Mesopotamia. They were the messengers of a new prophet, Mani, who had died as a martyr at the hands of the Sasanian kings in 277. Mani saw himself as the Paul of his age. He sent his missionaries as apostles to establish his holy church in all regions of the earth, from the Roman Empire in the west, through Persia to the Kushan kingdom of Central Asia in the east. Mani's missionaries were called the elect of his church. Following current Christian practice, those who they ministered to were called either catechumens or, in the Latin West, auditores, hearers. The elect claimed to model their behavior on exactly the same patterns of extreme poverty combined with ceaseless mobility, which the radical Christians of Syria had already come to see as the distinctive mark of all true disciples of Jesus. The words of the great Manichaean Coptic Psalms of the wanderers echo scenarios taken from the Gospels and from the apocryphal Acts of the Apostles. They went from village to village. They went into the roads hungry, with no bread in their hands. They walked in the heat, thirsting. They took no water to drink. No gold, no silver, no money did they take with them on their way. They went into the villages not knowing anybody. They were welcomed for his, the Lord's sake. They were loved for his name's sake. Now, dramatic though these forms of wandering and mendicant asceticism might be, as they spread throughout the Syriac world, and thence to the Mediterranean and up the valley of the Nile, they merged with ease into a religious landscape that was already as crowded with radical groups as was the burnt-over region of Upper New York State in the early 19th century. To many Christian communities, the Manichaean missionaries came simply as avatars of St. Paul and of the apostles, as these figures had come to be imagined by Christian believers of the late 3rd century. This was how the followers of Mani, the Manichaeans, first entered the Nile Valley. Now, it's merely an accident of preservation due to the bone-dry sands of Egypt, which have ensured that the bulk of the original documents of the Manichaean movement have survived on papyrus in Egypt, in the form of letters and of translations from the original Syriac into both Greek and into Coptic, the language of the pharaohs in its late antique form. What we now have are no more than the scattered remnants in translation of one of the greatest outbursts of religious creativity to emerge from the Syriac-speaking world. Major Manichaean texts were discovered in 1930 in the Fayoum, an oasis close to the Nile Delta. In 1990, yet more, both in Greek and in Coptic, were discovered far to the south at Ismant al-Kharab, ancient Kelis, in the Dakhle oasis of the western desert of Egypt. It's to these last that I will now turn. Kelis lay 750 miles to the south of Alexandria. A cache of Manichaean letters, dating perhaps from the 340s, were discovered in 1990 in the corner of one house. They enable us for the very first time to listen into a Manichaean community in action from the inside. And what we overhear is a remarkably Christian religious language. In the words of their first editor, Ian Gardner, Manichaeism in Kelis could be, he said, best described as a superior, more effective form of Christian belief. One letter is addressed to the Lady Irene, a catechumen, that is, a lay disciple of the Manichaean elect. In this letter, a member of the elect praised Irene for having placed her treasure in heaven in the right way. She had offered them material support. The elect addressed her, she whose deeds resemble her name, peace, our spiritual daughter, the daughter of the Holy Church, the catechumen of the faith, the good tree whose fruit never withers, which is your love which emits radiance every day. She who has acquired for herself riches and stored them away in the treasuries that are in the heights, where moths shall not find a way, nor shall thieves dig through to them to steal. The last lines, as you see, are a direct citation from the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew 6, 19 to 20. But the letter then added an explanation of the treasuries that are in the heights. Which treasuries, writes the elect, are the sun and the moon. It's only these last telltale reference to the sun and the moon as active agents in a basically cosmic drama of salvation, which identified the writer of the letter as a Manichae. Now this newly discovered exchange of Manichaean letters shows with the crispness of an X-ray photograph one path by which, in circles adjacent and interlocking with mainline Christianity, treasure on earth might flow upwards to become treasure in heaven. And let's look at this a bit more closely. First, the elect needed Irene and her fellow catechumens. You being for us helpers, writes the elect, worthy patrons, firm unbending pillars of the church, while we ourselves rely upon you. I was very grateful to you 10 million times, whether we are far or we are near. Indeed, we have found remembrance among you. Now, therefore, may it stay with you, this knowledge and this faith which you have known and believed in. Therefore, I beg you, my beloved daughters, that you will send me 2 large jars of oil, for you know yourselves that we are in need here, since we are afflicted. It's a very oily letter. But second, what did Irene gain from her gift? She gained teaching, intercession, ultimately salvation. We see this clearly in a unique Manichaean document that was discovered at the beginning of the 20th century in the dry caves of North Africa, outside Teveste, modern Tebesse in Algeria. It may have been written at the same time as the young Augustine, as an auditor, a hearer of the Manichees, was solemnly feeding figs to the elect in return for their mighty prayers. The Codex spelled out the duty of the hearers to support the elect. It is made up of a patchwork of citations from the Gospels and, above all, from the letters of Paul. These citations dealt with exactly the same issues as we touched upon in our last talk. For the writer, they prove that these two ranks, founded on the same faith in the same church, support one another. Each gives to the other from their abundant possessions, the elect to the hearers from their heavenly treasure, the hearers to the elect from their earthly treasure. Now, what is noticeable in these Manichaean texts is that the only poor that are mentioned are the holy poor, the Manichaean elect. The real poor are pointedly, notably absent. This was a feature of Manichaeism which genuinely shocked mainline Christians in its apparent heartlessness. But as we saw last lecture, it grew directly out of a Christian dilemma that went back to the days of St. Paul. It represents a final, drastic stage in the splitting apart of the flow of wealth within the Christian churches between the real poor and the holy poor, between those who received alms and those who ministered to the Christian congregations, the bishops, clergies, teachers of an expanding church. We're dealing really with a change, one might say, from a sociological treatment of the gift to a soteriological treatment. In the Christian churches, almsgiving had been thought of as bringing real benefits to real persons in a real society. With the Manichees, by contrast, we are dealing with an entirely spiritual exchange in its most austere form, an act of alchemy by which dark matter, wealth and food was changed into the pure, weightless substance of light in an exchange of giving between hearers and elect from which the rough poor were absent. In the form of daily food and other kinds of support, the alms of the Manichaean hearers went directly to the elect, to the holy poor, that is, and to no one else. Now, it's important to realize that an entire view of the universe lay behind this radically otherworldly option.